Hello, and welcome to another session in our teaching series Hidden Facts in Biology. In this video series of today, we are going to be looking at irritability, also known as sensitivity. By way of introduction, we'll start by defining what it is. The ability that living organisms have to respond to changes in their environment is known as irritability or sensitivity. Environmental changes could be internal or external. So, what are the examples of these changes? Examples of external environmental changes include a change in temperature and light intensity, while example of an internal environmental change is a change in pH. So, having established the fact that irritability is the way organisms respond to changes in their environment, it is also important for us to know the different types of responses. There are three major types of responses, and they are the tactic or taxis responses. Secondly, the nastic response, and thirdly, the tropic response or movement. So we'll be looking at each of these differently. Firstly, let's look at the taxis or tactic movement or responses. This type of response is a type of directional response or movement in which a whole organism moves from one place to another in response to external stimuli, such as the stimulus of light, temperature, water, and certain chemicals. Movement or response in this scenario is either positive or negative. Examples of tactic movements are thermotaxis, 2. Phototaxis, 3. Hydrotaxis, 4. Chemotaxis, and 5. Rheotaxis. Let's look at these different types of taxis movements individually. Firstly, let's take the thermotaxis. This is the movement of organisms in response to temperature change or in response to heat. Example is a snail moving away from a hot region to a cold region. And such example like this is known as a negative thermotaxis. And if the snail was moving from a cold region to a hot region, it will be a positive thermotaxis. Secondly, let's look at phototaxis. The response of animals to stimulus of light is called phototaxis. For example, the organism iguana moving away from sunlight, and in such a case, it is known as a negative phototaxis. And if these organisms move towards the light source, it is known as a positive phototaxis. Thirdly, let's look at hydrotaxis. Hydrotaxis is the response of the whole organism in response to water or humidity. We can say to the stimulus of water or humidity. For example, is the woodlouse moving towards areas of high humidity. How about chemotaxis? What is chemotaxis? Chemotaxis is the movement of organisms in response to chemical stimuli. And an example is the organisms amoeba and paramecium moving away from chemicals. This is an example of a negative chemotaxis. Another example is the sperm cells moving towards the chemical substance produced by the eggs or oocytes. This is known as a positive chemotaxis. Another example yet is mosquitoes avoiding repellents. That is when you wear a mosquito repellent or you spray it, the mosquito avoid it. This is a negative chemotaxis. The next chemotactic movement we will look at is the rheotaxis movement. Rheotaxis is the response of organism to the stimuli of current. For example, many freshwater fish, e.g. tilapia, move against the current of the water. Having looked at the tactic or taxis response, let's take a look at the nastic movement. Nastism or nastic movement is also known as the sleeping movement. This is a type of response in which a part of a plant moves in a non-directional stimuli, such as changes in light intensity, temperature, or humidity, and the response is non-directional. Example of plastic movements are: number one, the closing of the morning glory flower when the light intensity is low. Two, the petals of sunflower which opens in the light and closes in the dark. Three, the folding of the leaflet of the mimosa plant when it is touched. Four, the closing of the leaflet of the flamboyant tree. Five, opening of the 4 o'clock plant at about 4 p.m. daily. Sleeping movement or nastic movement also occurs in the leaves of the St. Thomas plant, Acacia, the pinnate and bipinnate leaves of many leguminous plants open and close as a result of changes in temperature, light intensity, and humidity of the atmosphere. The next type of response we'll look at is the tropic movement or tropism. This is a type of response in which a part of a plant moves in response to a directional stimulus. The direction of the movement is related to that of the stimulus, and it is positive if the plant part grows towards the stimulus, and it is negative if the plant part grows away from the stimulus. Tropisms are actually named according to the stimuli. For example, there could be phototropism, which is a response to light, as photons miss light. And there could be hydrotropism, which is a response to water, because when we talk about hydro, we are responding to water or we need water. Now, let's look at the various examples of tropisms. They include: number one, phototropism. In phototropism, the stimulus here is light. For example, the bending of plant shoots towards light, and this is called positive phototropism. There could also, however, be a negative phototropism, which is seen in the movement of the root of plants away from the light source. The next example of tropism is the geotropism. In geotropism, the stimulus in this case is gravity. Examples are: the shoots of green plants bend away from gravity. Since it is away, it is known as a negative geotropic movement or negative geotropism, while the roots bend towards gravity and is positive geotropic movement. The next type of tropic movement we talk about is the hydrotropism. In hydrotropism, the stimulus here is water. Example of this is how the root of plants move towards moisture, which is known as positive hydrotropism or positive hydrotropic movement, and the shoot bends away from moisture and is known as negative hydrotropic movement. Now let's look at stigmotropism. In stigmotropism, the stimulus is touch. For example, is how the tendrils of a climbing plant twine around a support, and this is known as a positive response to touch, while the root grows away from touch as a negative response or negative stigmotropism. The next aspect we'll be talking about in today's lecture is the differences between the nastic or sleep movement and the tropic movement or tropism. Number one, for the nastic or sleeping movement, movements are reversible or growth is reversible. While for tropism, movements are not easily reversible. That is, growth in tropic movement is irreversible. 2. In nastic movement, the movement is usually non-directional. That is, it is neither positive nor negative response. While in tropic movement, the movement is a directional one. That is, it could be positive or negative depending on the type of stimuli. 3. Nastic movement can be due to changes in set to go, while tropic movement is not due to go. 4. Nastic movement is not a growth movement, but tropic movement involves growth movement. 5. In elastic movement, response to stimuli is very fast, but in tropic movement, response is very slow. 6. Response are due to changes in temperature, humidity, light intensity, or touch in elastic movement. But in tropic movement, the responses are due to water, gravity, and chemical. And lastly, in elastic movement, response does not lead to growth, but in tropic movement, responses leads to growth. So this brings us to the ending of the teaching session in this series. Now we are going to be taking some examples. Our first example says elastic movement is A. Response to light stimulus, B. Non-directional, C. Directional, D. Response to internal stimulus. The correct answer is B. Elastic movement is a non-directional kind of movement. Our question 2. Taxism differs from tropism because A. The whole organism is affected, B. It is a directional movement, C. It is a response to multidirectional stimuli, D. Part of the organism is affected. The correct answer is A, because in taxism, the whole organism is affected, but in tropism, just a part of the organism is affected. The next question says, when bacteria swim from cold to warm regions, this is known as A. Positive phototaxis, B. Negative phototaxis, C. Positive chemotaxis, D. Negative chemotaxis. The answer to this question is C. A positive chemotaxis. The movement of bacteria from a cold region to a warm region is an example of a positive chemotaxis movement, as it is a response to temperature, a positive response to temperature. The next question says the ability of a living organism to detect and respond to changes in the environment is referred to as A. Irritability, B. Growth, C. Taxis, D. Locomotion. The answer to this question is A, as irritability is the ability of a living organism to detect and respond to changes in the environment. It can also be called sensitivity. The next question says a directional growth movement of a plant's part in response to a unilateral stimulus is called A. Tactic movement, B. Slips movement, C. Locomotion, D. Tropism, A. Phototropism. The correct answer to this question is D, as tropism is a directional growth movement of a plant part in response to a unilateral stimulus. The next question says the response shown by tips of the roots and shoots of a plant to the stimulus of gravity is A. Heterotropism, B. Phototropism, C. Hydrotropism, D. Geotropism. The correct answer is D. The tips of the roots and shoot of a plant responds to the stimulus of gravity, and this is known as geotropism. This brings us to the end of the examples. Now we'll look at some exercises. These exercises are taken from our test, Hidden Facts in Biology, pages 261. The answers are also provided in the answer section of the book. Do not to get your copy and check if you got the answers correctly. Thank you for listening.